I am pleased to have back colleague and friend Samantha Burns. If you haven't joined us in an episode where Samantha has been a guest, you've missed out, so go back and check those out. But for the purposes of today, we'll reintroduce you. I'm so embarrassed. I realized the last time when we started, I put you on the wrong continent. I think I just come back from Australia and I suggested you were based out of Australia, another fabulous place where people have great accents, but it's not South Africa. And so I introduced you to Samantha Burns, this time correctly from the continent for which she is located in South Africa. She is one of the leading authorities in banking and customer experience and broadly customer experience tool creation. So we're going to talk about some of the tools that she has developed, specifically a tool that she's developed in this particular context today. She has a fabulous website, which we'll make sure that you know how to get to in terms of the CX brilliance that she delivers. So we will do all of that. But first, let me say hello and welcome.
Hello, Joseph. So good to speak to you again.
It's great to talk to you. Now, so one of the things that if people haven't joined us, that really strikes me about you is that you not only have this background as a well-trained CX professional, you've done consulting largely in the financial services space for a long time, but broadly beyond that. And the thing that distinguishes you from most of my colleagues around the globe is that you took your knowledge and you systematized it using technologies, and you did it kind of in a very scalable way, right? So some people would say, all right, I'm going to build this for the Fortune 500 in the US or the major enterprise-wide clients around the world. But you really said, I need to get this accessible to smaller clients. Really sweet spot, I think, is a bunch of mid-range clients. And these also scale up just nicely for the enterprise players as well. Tell me a little bit about your journey to developing tools. Okay. And how that ties into your consultative training background as well.
Yep. I think my first introduction into tools and management information and the value of those type of products for clients started way back in the 90s, where I was responsible for retaining all the corporate clients for a particular firm. And I discovered how useful it was to be able to provide management information through to these clients. And that's obviously particularly relevant to today's product. But beyond that, the way I got into developing tools for my existing clients was simply by helping them meet their needs. I was discovering clients hitting their heads against the same brick wall, and it was just need-based that I decided, well, hey, one way to help these clients solve their problem is to develop a tool accordingly. So it was embryonic. It formed out of a natural client need, not out of, hey, this is something fantastic that I think customers need. It was based on existing client needs, and it grew with the clients.
So, you look at companies in the United States that do some of the things we're going to talk about today, customer listening, for example. And, I was fortunate to speak at a conference for Medallia, which is one of the prime tools. It's a super Cadillac tool for doing this. And many of my smaller clients say, it's way too expensive for us, or wow, I don't need all of that functionality. I need something that enables me to know what my customers are thinking and be able to do a little bit more drill down on that beyond just some kind of superficial. It seems like that's what we're going to talk about today, is that solution set that you have positioned for your clients and for anyone who's interested in exploring more with you about it. Can you talk to us a little bit about the tool that we're alluding to now?
Sure. So we're talking about the customer measurement tool, which is a management information system, basically, a simple version, which has some really special components in it that I would say are different. One, in that it can consolidate numerous results from metrics across a multi-dimensional business issue. And I can come back to what we mean by that. Okay. Second, it gives a single score on a broader company issue, such as customer experience. But that single score is based on numerous metrics, not just like the Net Promoter Score, which is a single score, fantastic, people chase that number, but it is it doesn't measure the full spectrum of customer experience in terms of what the company is offering. Three, it's a tool that helps companies kind of insists that leaders give good thought to what is great, good, bad, and ugly before they even start, that they've got a clear vision as to what it is that they're trying to achieve in metrics for their customers. And then finally, the tool is really useful in that it chases up the relevant people to put in their results of the metrics at the right time for executive reports, and in fact also chases them to put in their corrective actions when a result is not at the desired level.
So if we think about like a yellow, green, red sort of mindset, right?
Yep.
Like there are things that are in the green and all is good and the world is fine, and then there's this kind of cautionary tale in the yellow of some data that's trending in the wrong direction. We better get it, staved off before we dive into the red ocean of gnashing teeth, right? That's really kind of the beginning of anticipating really what is acceptable thresholds.
Yes.
Across your business landscape and being able to pre-program in those kind of KPI type thresholds. Is that fair to say?
That's exactly it. So right up front, when a company is deciding what are the metrics that are relevant to their customer experience framework, so the system caters for their framework, totally customizable, or they can use one of the existing frameworks that I am able to put on the table. But it requires that upfront they determine what their thresholds are. And then the system will automatically take the results that are inputted and immediately calculate, well, where does this sit? Is this sitting in the red? Even though the inputter of the data might not know that. If it's sitting in the red, it will then immediately activate to the relevant party to give their input as to, well, what corrective action are they going to take? Or is there some really good feasible reason why it's in the red at this point in time? Sure. And that then gets fed into the exec reports.
So there's several levels to this, right? Kind of having this dashboard that you can look at that gives you, data that's analytic to the important things in your business. But it's also kind of requiring a discipline on the part of the entire organization to be cognizant of these things and to be sourcing the information needed to assess the health of the organization.
Yeah.
So how do you, there are many questions. Like I'll use a Net Promoter Score because you just threw it out a minute ago. I have clients who literally come to me and go, well, what is good NPS? Like, how would I know where the green line is? And when should I get and what's red? And frequently I have no baseline data. So it's, we have to kind of set their baseline, but they're often looking for some guidance. Now there are other business metrics that they know what bad looks like, and they can set those thresholds. Do they consult with you in the development of some of these initial components, or are they on their own?
Both. So on the one hand, we make use of their existing metrics. So what a number of clients have discovered is that we can look at their existing metrics, and it can tell a customer story depending on the framework that they've got. So if we set a framework that says these are the outcomes that they're wanting to achieve, what of their existing metrics tell us or give us some indication of those outcomes being achieved, it immediately puts like 3D spectacles on that they can now see their existing data with a customer lens. Okay. So there's that component where then they know what those thresholds are. In other instances where it's a new metric, where they haven't measured this type of issue before, or they don't know what the thresholds are, sure, if they would like my input, I'm able to give some input, and or it's a brand new metric that we discover as we go along as to what will the thresholds be. So one needs to run the metric for a duration in order to see where things land, and what are the correlate metrics associated with that one that would give us some further clues.
This is why I am not in this business, okay? Because literally, I think you have to have both sides of your brain really overdeveloped to do this. Because on the one hand, there's this whole conceptual, what does good look like?
Yes.
How do we assess that, evaluate it? And then there's all this super technical stuff, like how do I take whatever my data sets are and get them effectively inputted into this tool such that the output comes out in a way that enables me to make business decisions. So help me with that middle part, the part that's kind of yucky to people like me, which is the interface of our existing tools and technologies and inputting them into this machine that spits out something. How does that all get done? And I'm sure there are many different people that are involved in this whole process, but in a smaller operation, let's just say, you've got a office. I'm thinking I have a call later today with an attorney's office who may have 30 attorneys in the office, and they're trying to manage the customer experience or the experience of their clients. How does this all get set up with someone like you, and how do they pipe it all together?
Sure. So two ways. One, there's expensive way, and there's the generally the inexpensive way. It depends on how much the company wants their data to be real time. If they're needing that the results of a metric are reported every hour on the hour, then you're going to need system talking to system, because it's just too much to ask an individual to be putting in that data. So then we build an API, which we quote on specifically for that client to say, we can make the system talk to system, and it will then transfer the data, no problem. But that's an expensive route. The more cost-effective route is to say, well, this is something that we measure once every month. So what's the cost of one person putting in this information for this particular metric? It's another person for another metric. 12 times a year. The system reminds them exactly when to put it in, what the metric is that they need to put in, reminds them again if they don't get it done in time. And they simply put in that. You can make it a lower level staff member as well, because it simply reminds them, this is the metric we need, put in the results. And so it's designed to get the human beings to put in the results, given that that's something that they're going to be working with anyway. So someone who's in the sales office will know what the sales stats are every month anyhow. You don't need system to talk to system. You can get the human being to put it in. Sure, there's a risk of error.
Dang, you one of my questions. That's my one question I had about all this. Go ahead.
But there are checks and balances, not that the system necessarily knows what those variances could be. But the results, it will immediately kick out on the thresholds, and anyone who then needs to be accountable, because each metric there's a person accountable and the administrator. So the person accountable would then be able to see that, hang on a second, it looks like an extra zero has been added to this number. It doesn't look right. Mm-hmm. And also the underlying evidence behind that number can be uploaded into the system for them to do a verification check. But so those are the two routes, system to system, or the human beings putting in the results. Most of the time we find that it is reasonably accurate, and the reports are based on those inputs by the human beings on the various metrics.
So let's kind of keep it on the human to human for a moment before we get into the complex version of this. And on the human side of data input on this, and I'm looking at whatever my reports are, and I'm getting data that's not super real time, but is actionable intelligence data for me. Then is the cost of these types of programs based on the number of data points that are being managed? Is it based on the size of the customers, the number of users? I mean, how does pricing work in these kinds of models?
Totally user-based. So the number of users that the company chooses to be responsible, A, for inputting the results, and B, for being accountable for each of the metrics. Now, that will naturally be a function most of the time of the number of metrics that they have. But we certainly encourage a robust number of metrics when measuring a complex business issue. One of the shortcomings we see is when a company wants to measure customer experience and has so few measures. They have the customer satisfaction score, maybe a retention stat, and very little else. And they say they're customer centric. And it's like, really, there's a lot more that the company can measure that will give you a stronger and fuller picture as to the customer experience that you are actually delivering.
So, I mentioned Medallia earlier. So Medallia worked with Mercedes-Benz, which is a client of mine. And so in the journey with Mercedes, we had a metric that was a roll-up of all kinds of other indicators of customer experience health. And we called it the customer experience scale because we weren't particularly creative. So, but the customer experience scale metric was a roll-up of all these different indicators. So it might be, get it right first time, accurate quoting, parts on time. It could be a million indices. There's a lot of them. And they rolled up into this thing. And then we became, I think, more sophisticated in saying, well, we're having problems with getting it right the first time. That seems to be a kind of emerging problem. When we look at this dashboard, the big number is being affected most by the variance in this number over here. And so then we weighted that more, we trained to that more, we shared best practices on how to do that better. And then we would see that going in the direction we wanted and the improvement. And then we'd watch for other breaks in the pressure across the landscape of the customer, right? Is that the way this works in a more accessible tool than what had to be done at price points that we probably would never want to even talk about?
Yeah. So this does exactly the same thing in that it does roll-up scores. So you can have a single score for the whole organization on the customer experience. And in fact, is not even limited to customer experience. It could be balanced scorecard. It could be compliance to various customer-related regulations. Whatever the company is.
I don't care about any of those things. All I care about. I'm kidding. No, I'm kidding. It could be anything though that management needs multiple inputs to fuse to a roll-up. I got you.
Exactly. So the system does the normalization of normalizes every single data input, so that one can get a single score that is relevant and rolls up for the organization, for each division. So there can be a single score for a division. There can be a single score for each customer outcome within the customer experience framework. So they may have a framework that's made of 10 outcomes that they're wanting to achieve, so they can get a score across the company for each of those 10 outcomes, not just the overall customer experience score.
Got it. So if you just get it right the first time, there could be a variety of different inputs that get to that customer outcome. Yeah. That outcome could be rolled up even to a broader metric of overall CX, for example. So that's very interesting. So a lot of this is coming to you and saying, here's my business case, here's my need case, either in CX or otherwise. Let me understand how this tool works. You help me map my inputs. I mean, there's got to be this can't just be off the shelf, can it? I mean, this should be guided.
A lot of work happens at the setup stage where companies get, often we find that they're not too sure how to measure what they need to measure. And it just takes a discussion around the metrics that they've got, unpacking those metrics and looking at them from a different perspective, and then identifying where they are missing certain metrics for outcomes. So that is.
Whenever I have these discussions, I always end up doing a terrible job on selling the throughput of it all, right? Like I try to understand it. I get all into what is it? Help me understand. How does this pipe in? But I don't really sell the dream very well. And it's often because I get too down the rabbit hole of curiosity. But let's just talk about what can you get from this. And you have these clients who have used this technology and they are seeing blank, right? And I never talk about that. So what are the things that happen when you actually have this robustly running in your world?
Yeah. Right. So perhaps it's good that I can just refer to an example. So one of the companies that is using it is a bank in South Africa. And the first big benefit that they saw right up front was at the setup stage where they realized, oh my goodness, we thought we were measuring or we thought we understood what our customer experience is, and we don't even have metrics, any metrics associated with this particular outcome that we believe is an important outcome. So that was the first aha, that we then said, right, we need to establish what those, we need to agree on what metrics would be suitable, how would we get them implemented, and that would then be a separate kind of like a mini project that would be spawned to get that metric up and running and the associated processes, or whether it needed a system to track it and so forth. That's that. The second big benefit that they got was, as they started getting the results in, and this was now discussed at the risk committee and the executive committee, they started loving this fact that they could get a single score that would tell that they would be able to track exactly where they are, and then have a comparative indicator across their different divisions. Now, this particular client uses it only with their internal divisions, whereas some other clients could easily use it for their external third parties, where they may want to measure how third parties are performing, for example, distributors or franchisees and so forth. So the tool caters equally well for internal and external. So for them, they really appreciated this single score that they could track. Yet at the same time, the third big benefit that came through associated with that single score was that it wasn't a limited number. In other words, it wasn't just measuring one dimension. It was a single score that was a culmination of multiple dimensions, or measuring multiple facets, which helps them deal with the risk of surrogation. So a great Harvard Business Review article came out late last year on the subject of surrogation, where they put it so well. They define surrogation in terms of being the behavioral tendency for us human beings to confuse that which is being measured with the metric being used. So we confuse customer experience with the customer satisfaction score. Then people chase the customer satisfaction score to death and send out surveys that irritate customers second to none, or because they're trying to get the results of this metric when actually it's customer experience improvements that they're trying to achieve. So they lose sight of the strategy.
Worse because of all of that measurement.
Totally.
The measurement is the experience, but the measurement is interrupting the experience. I'm so with you. And I remember reviewing that article when it came out. It's just so crazy, but you're absolutely right. So now they have a better sense of what real customer experience is in this bank, and they have metrics that enable them to understand it without that kind of surrogate.
So they do surveys as well. I mean, they do rely on survey input, but not as intense, not so totally dependent on survey input. So they have their voice of the customer inputs, great, valuable, but they've also got their company metrics such as staff turnover and retention and complaint stats and so forth, which give a fuller picture that helps them avoid the myopia of, 8 out of 10, that's fantastic. And it's like, no, there's a lot more to the color of that picture.
Well, one of the things, and it's been a long time since I did graduate school and had to get a Ph.D. and had to know my statistics. But when I get into these situations, I often find myself relying on statisticians to help me with this multivariate analysis stuff, right? Because you're pulling in lots of variables and then you're merging them into a single data point often, which is the ultimate health metric in whatever thing it is, if it's a customer experience scale. And a lot of my colleagues who are PhD level statisticians talk about kind of measurement variance and converging measurement error when you have multiple data sets. This is a little more complicated than just somebody going out and trying to cobble this together on their own through Excel spreadsheets. I guess that's what I'm wanting to warn people that. So what if you have 5 different variables you want to pull together and then you want to try to smush them together somehow through spreadsheets? It tends not to work out. It does take a real psychometric sort of mindset about it all.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Absolutely. I think what the one element of this tool, which is is simpler than the more advanced tools, is the fact that currently it doesn't do weighting.
Okay.
It's something that is potential, that if clients, once they get more sophisticated with it and they're identifying, right, they want certain metrics to weigh more heavily than others, to do that. But at this point in time, all metrics are treated equally.
Okay. Yeah. And so if you think something is not particularly important, you might not include it. And you're kind of including value items, I guess, into the ultimate roll-up. All right, so tell us what else I should know about this tool in terms of consideration. We can definitely talk about how people can get a hold of you so that they can find out more about it and see if it's applicable to their setting. I'm thinking of a client right now that is super absorbed with voice of customer tool, and probably over defines the success of their customer experience through VOC, which is, I'd rather have that than nothing, but it is only part of the story.
Yeah. And I have had clients experiencing exactly the same thing, where they had an IVR on their call center where people then rated the calls after the conversation, and it gave super inflated numbers. They thought they were just the bee's knees. Right. And after greater interrogation and looking at their metrics surrounding customer, and particularly in their case, it was customer trust, they realized, no, they really have a number of gaping holes that the voice of the customer was not revealing to them. Plus, then obviously the deviant behavior that goes with, potentially, depending on how people are incentivized, that their call centers were kind of like sometimes putting people through to the IVR and sometimes not. Depending on how that conversation went. But with this particular tool, it really is, I think, fantastic for medium companies, large companies that are serious about their customer centricity, or at the very least are wanting to make sure they comply with customer related regulations. In terms of cost, well, it totally varies in terms of number of users. It could be anything, could be $10 per user. If there's lots of users, it could be $50 per user per month if it's a few number of users. Mm-hmm. So the range is pretty. It would need a conversation to see, well, how big is the company? How many people do they anticipate need to use the system in order to.
It also begs the question of what's the value of really knowing, right? Because the value of really knowing and being able to track and really hit levers that are giving you a holistic picture of your customer experience, which is my world. And again, I know this tool is robust beyond that. But I just think so often I will talk to a company and I'll say, how's your customer experience? And they'll say, our NPS is blank. And I'll say, but how's your customer experience? So, if they don't quite understand what I'm asking, it's like they've told me. And I don't quite get it because, well, how many customer complaints are you fielding? What's customer resolution? What's time to resolution? What's all these other factors which aren't always captured in NPS, particularly sometimes when these response rates on an NPS question are relatively low anyway, the whole system is designed to ask the NPS question when people are most satisfied, like the moment. Well, we just gave you the keys to your new car. How's that?
Yes. How are you feeling?
Right. How do you feel with us 6 months later when it's in the shop, right? Now, we're not asking then, but we're telling you we have a great customer experience. Where this would be, how frequently is somebody back in the shop in 6 months, or other variables that you can track that really speak to the true health of a relationship with a customer. All right, let's tell people how they can get a hold of the amazing brilliance of Samantha. And I think that, I'm using the word brilliance here as partly a tease in to your beautifully upgraded website. So you want to tell them about that and how else they can get a hold of you?
Thank you. Well, more information is available on the website, which, as you mentioned, brilliancecx.com. And I'm available through the links on that website. There's contact us, or just email me directly, Samantha@brilliancecx.com. And
But now I've made it clear that you're in South Africa, not in Australia, and people are going to go, but wait, I'm in the US. How in the world could she possibly help me lift this in my business if I'm in Canada or other parts that are listening? That has not been a problem. We are in Skype right now, connecting with each other, and I'm sure that that's a similar modality for you to be able to help customize these solutions. Is that fair to say?
Yep. And I travel as and when clients need me to. That is part of my delight of serving my customers. I enjoy going to meet them in their country of choice. But particularly where it's online tools, it often doesn't need that type of travel. But consultations around it, discussions, unpacking metrics, sometimes that needs more face-to-face time. So
I can attest to Samantha traveling. I was in South Africa, and she traveled greatly several times to engage me in some conversations of great meaning. So thank you so much for your time, Samantha Burns. Check her out, brilliantcx.com. That's brilliantcx.com. We'll put that information in the show notes. Take care. We'll catch you again. There's another tool I want to catch up with you on, so we'll get on that conversation in the near future.
Great. Thank you, Joseph. Take care. Go well.